Well, David, thanks so much for taking the time out this morning to be with us. I'm looking forward to engaging with you on some hot topics and really getting some answers to questions that I've personally got and many of my faculty friends have about professors' rights in the university.
Well, thanks for having me here. I'm excited to talk about it. It's a hugely important topic and one that's really timely, actually.
Yeah, well, you and I personally go back because you helped me, you got me exonerated about 2 years ago, I think it was, at Indiana University when I was in the classroom facing some difficult situations. And I didn't know where to turn, and I called you, and it's just a real privilege to be here with you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. That was a fantastic result that you got, and we're really happy that we were able to serve you.
Yeah. Well, I've got several questions for you that I think is going to be beneficial for professors in our network of professors across the country. But before I begin, let me just say that, from my background experience in the last 10 years teaching in classrooms at secular universities and in coming alongside Christian faculty working in secular universities, it seems that I've run across and been able to label the three most common obstacles that Christian professors face in secular universities. And it's the third one that I really am looking forward to you illuminating for us. But they are the philosophical, the practical, and the political. And so basically, the philosophical is what we do is we try to come alongside and encourage Christian professors working in secular universities to be able to integrate their faith and their reason, faith and vocation. The practical is in terms of thinking creatively and winsomely, exploring ways to self-identify maybe in the classroom or with your colleagues, and do it in a way that's not obnoxious, but that's attractive, and that you can express yourself and be who you are. And as a professor, you profess certain things to be true. Why should you have to hide that? But it really gets to the rub when we hit the third P, and that is the political. And so as you well know, we are facing a firestorm in this nation right now, and the university campus is really the hot spot of so much of this. And so I think what a lot of people, maybe a consensus of what they're thinking, if not saying, is when I enter into a secular university as a Christian, into the university building or a classroom, do I have to check my religious beliefs, my Christian worldview at the door to go in?
Well, that's certainly what a lot of people think. And I think a lot of faculty members walk through that door of their institution and they say, I don't want to rock the boat. I'm going to just leave my faith outside, and it's not going to enter the classroom, or it's not going to enter my workspace at all. And that's really unfortunate because universities are supposed to be a marketplace of ideas. Students are there
to be.
Yeah, students are there to learn new things. They're there to test their ideas and to engage with faculty on controversial topics. We want them to do that. That's how our society grows and flourishes. So the short answer to your question is no. They don't have to check their faith at the door. The Supreme Court has said long ago, constitutional rights extend through the schoolhouse gates, and faculty have the right to free expression on campus in certain ways and aspects. And I think they need to feel comfortable in the fact that they can share their faith on campus.
Well, that's great. I know personally professors who have instructed students to check their beliefs at the door and not to bring them in. And I've heard on numerous occasions what happens when that does not get dealt with properly.
Yeah, of course.
So.
Yeah, and even when I was in law school, I remember there were several faculty members who were unwilling to say that they were Christian unless I went to office hours and approached them and we got to know each other a little bit. Then all of a sudden I found out, oh, wow, you go to a church down the street from my church. And that's unfortunate. Students should be able to interact with their professors on that kind of spiritual level, and faculty really need to feel the ability to just speak freely, as they see fit in their classroom and with their students.
Yeah, I think it has to do maybe with a misunderstanding of that relationship between church and state. Even the Christian professors I've talked with sometimes say, well, I can't say anything like that in the classroom. This is the public sphere. My faith is my private sphere.
Right. Yeah, the so-called separation of church and state has been misquoted, misused, and misapplied by many people throughout the years. And it's done a lot of damage to our society because religion has unfortunately been left, on the outside all too often. But it's not something that faculty need to be concerned about that much. It is something where faculty, they don't need to feel like, there's this strict wall of separation like people like to talk about all the time. Faith is a part of who we are, and faculty need to be able to live freely on campus as they are, and that includes being able to express their beliefs and share their points of view with others.
Yeah, I think a lot of the Christian professors, they don't know what it looks like, even if they can overcome the obstacle of the privatization of faith versus reason, which is public, as though faith is not reasonable. Mm-hmm. Even if they can overcome that, they don't know what it looks like. Are there certain things that as professors we can say in the classroom and other things that we can't say in the classroom?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to drill down to exact specifics on every little thing, but here's a good rule of thumb that I like to tell faculty. You can talk about anything that's germane to the subject matter of your class. So if you're teaching, history and there's religious groups that are part of that history and you want to talk about their faith and what they believed, go right ahead. If you're in a philosophy class and it's relevant to bring in the philosophy of religion, go right ahead. And so that germaneness standard has been applied by the courts and across our country, and it's one that's really been upheld multiple times and is a good standard for faculty to live by. And that's just when I'm talking about teaching the curriculum of the class. Because whenever you're thinking about curriculum, you want to think about there's basically two competing academic freedom interests here. There's the academic freedom of the institution, and it has the ability to decide, here's what we're going to teach. And here's who the people are that are going to teach these classes. They hire and fire the faculty. And then there's the academic freedom of the professors themselves. And they have the ability to teach freely, study new things, publish and research on topics that might be controversial or might not. That's their choice. And so these two interests, sometimes they appear to be almost in competition when you're talking about teaching things in the classroom, but as long as the professor is talking about things that are germane to that subject of that class, it's completely fine.
Even in some cases where it's clearly germane to the content. And so now I'm referring to something that we're both familiar with. And in my case in particular, there's the question now, even if it's germane to the content, if it's politically incorrect, it seems like you can't talk about these things in the classroom. And in my case, teaching an ethics class, and I stack the deck against myself. I assign atheist textbooks and authors in articles so that I don't come across as biased. And yet, even when the author brings up the issue of homosexuality, and I come and I give an alternate perspective, I'm taken to the mat for that. Mm-hmm. I mean, the feel is, and I know several of my philosopher friends say if they're in a secular university, they will not even touch that topic because they know, even though it's talked about in the texts, it's one that if you talk about and you're on the wrong side, you could face some severe reprimand.
You've touched on a really important point, and that is, even though there is this academic freedom and there is the free speech rights of faculty on campus, universities, unfortunately, tilt to the left and are largely atheistic or agnostic. There are very few Christians in the academy these days. And because of that, and because the administration and the faculty are so lopsided, they oftentimes will create these policies, both for students and faculty, that we call speech codes, because that's essentially what they are. They tell students and faculty, here's what you can and cannot say. They've basically enshrined in university policies these words or phrases or ideas that are quote-unquote politically incorrect. And that's unfortunate. It is an outgrowth of that, politically correct movement of the late, 80s and early 90s. And it's something that's persisted on campus to this day. And so it's a huge problem on campus. People are afraid to say things in a community that's designed to say all sorts of things,
Yeah.
So it's something that I think really threatens the vibrancy of the academy, and that needs to be corrected.
I mean, so as professors, then how do we navigate around these hot topics, or should we be navigating around them shouldn't we be going through them? Because if we get too fearful about it, then we just roll over and the university is an entirely different place than it was designed to be. Should we be bold and march forward on some of these topics, being careful, or should we navigate around them?
I think you absolutely need to be bold. Certainly you want to be wise when you talk about these topics, and none of your faculty would do this sort of thing, but you want to make sure your conduct is appropriate towards the students, and you're not singling out any particular students who might disagree with you for poor treatment or something like that. But as long as you're minding those P's and Q's, you need to engage the students on these topics and provide different points of view. That's how students
Good.
learn. And even if there are speech codes on campus, that's something that faculty really shouldn't be afraid of, because even though there are speech codes, there's also what you and I know about, the First Amendment.
Yeah.
And that ultimately is the guiding principle that's going to protect faculty at most public universities, and is really going to guide some principles even at private universities that aren't necessarily bound by the First Amendment, but like to act like their public university brethren.
What we're trying to develop is a mentality where professors who are Christians don't have to continue being professors who just happen to be Christians, but they can become fully engaged, fully developed, fully integrated, what we call missional professors. And by that, we don't mean, being obnoxious or being derelict of duty in your job, replacing Physics 101 textbooks with John 3:16 every day in every way. But we still want to say, look, the professor has a certain character, has a certain set of beliefs. They're a professor. They profess to believe certain things. And so when it comes to theoretical issues, in a place of academic freedom and free thinking, they ought to be able to engage in those ways. But more specifically, practically now, what about when it comes to the use of public university resources like email, the computers, offices? Suppose a student comes into your office and shares something very personal. Is it appropriate for professors to say, maybe to share a Bible verse that's meaningful to them, or if they send an email saying, Prof, I can't come to class because my mom was just in a car accident, she's at the hospital, can you reply back and say, I'm praying for you and your family? Or is that just taking it overboard?
No, absolutely. I mean, you're acting as somebody who cares for your students when you do that. You're showing Christ's love to them, and absolutely you can offer to pray for a student. You can say that you're praying for a student if they encounter a situation like that. You never want to be in a position where you're making it sound like a student has to pray with you, or needs to read scripture in order to get a certain grade or a certain standing in the class. I mean, and most professors aren't doing that, and so they can absolutely share their faith with the student if it's an appropriate time to do so, and the student seems receptive to that. Are there going to be students who then go and complain? Unfortunately, probably yes, which is sad. But the faculty can feel protected in their ability to share their faith with their students and their peers in their department. Ultimately, when it comes right down to it, faculty at public universities, they're considered, basically spokespersons for the state in many aspects of their job, maybe in their department meetings and other things like that. But the Supreme Court has been very clear that they're really unique. They're not like your typical public employee who has to say and do whatever the government wants them to do. Professors are unique on public university campuses in that they need that ability to speak freely.
Absolutely.
In their research, their teaching, and their interactions with their peers and with students. So I think that is a situation that, again, faculty can feel comfortable, talking about their faith in appropriate circumstances like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a place of free thinking.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Supposed to be, anyway.
Yeah, right.
Can professors invite their students to church, to Bible studies, to maybe an event coming up on campus, a debate on God's existence or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, the guiding principle is just make sure you're not making it part of the course credit or something like that they attend the Bible study or Easter services or this debate. You can ask them to come to these things, invite them, feel free. But it's typically best to do it after class, at the end of class, say, oh, and by the way, here's some announcements that I have, and if anyone's interested, you're welcome to come to these things.
One other question. Are there any prominent cases that you can think of that ADF has been involved with respect to professors and issues germane to our conversation here?
Oh yeah, there's been many, but one comes to mind is the case of Dr. Mike Adams. He's a criminology professor at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington.
Very outspoken.
Yeah, very outspoken guy. He's got a column on townhall.com and a well-known speaker on issues of academic freedom and free speech on campus. But he actually entered the university and his teaching career as an atheist and someone who rejected conservatism and Christianity and everything, but became a Christian while pursuing his research as a criminologist. And so he eventually kind of came out to his department peers that he was a Christian, and he started writing these columns, and he was very passionate about those things. And several years go by, and he started encountering problems with the department. They would do things to kind of hamstring his efforts, and eventually he came up for promotion to full professorship, and he was denied, even though he had outpublished everyone in the department by a significant number. And he got wonderful teaching evaluations and had been heavily involved in university extracurricular activities. And so he thought, well, that's not right, and eventually contacted us at Alliance Defending Freedom, and we said, as we always do, yeah, we'll represent you for free, and we'll look into this. And so his case was one that was long and hard fought. We ended up having to file a lawsuit against the university, and it went up to a federal appellate court, which said, really for the first time, yeah, faculty at public universities have free speech rights, both inside and outside the classroom, and the university can't interfere with those. So even though he was writing these columns that his peers in the department didn't like and giving these speeches that they disagreed with, they couldn't hold that against him. That was still, part of his academic pursuits and something that he could do freely. And eventually his case, after 7 years, went to a jury. And the jury unanimously ruled in his favor that the university, by denying him a promotion to full professorship because of his writing and because of his speaking engagements, violated his First Amendment rights. And so, he was awarded back pay and given the full promotion by the court, which is something that the university should have given him in the first place. Right. But here's a guy who came to faith as a professor, decided to exercise that faith, and talk about it with his students and in his writing, and then suffered persecution for it, but didn't just put his faith back in a closet. He kept it out there, and he decided to pursue justice for himself, and he won in the end. And we're so thankful for him standing up for his faith and the privilege it was here at Alliance Defending Freedom to represent him.
And I'm grateful for professors like him who are bold enough to be outspoken, because then it helps the rest of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, David, as professors are on these campuses at public and private universities, we are grateful for Alliance Defending Freedom being here for our academic freedom and for our free speech. So we're glad to know we can go contact people like you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.